Hey folks, thanks for joining us on another Mitsubishi Lancer video. I'm going to show you how to change the spark plugs real quick, and let's get started. So I've already pre-loosened a lot of things here, but I'm going to show you the steps on how to get to the spark plugs first. This first cover, this is also, it's a 2010 Mitsubishi Lancer GTS. It's not the Sportback, and it's not an Evo. So this is strictly for this particular 2.4 liter engine on this model. So you've got two bolts here on this engine cover, one here and one here. That one's already removed. It's a 10 millimeter, or also you can see it's a Phillips. So just take those two bolts out, set them aside somewhere where they're not going to get kicked and lost, and then this comes off here. I like to put my bolts right inside the engine covers. And the next part here, we've got a little cover here that covers up the spark plugs and the coil packs. They are 10 millimeter bolts, so you can use a 10 millimeter socket. There's three, 1, 2, 3. Take all of those out. I've already got most of them out, and then you lift the cover off. And we're gonna set this thing aside here with the bolts in there. All right, so the next thing is the coil packs. You can see I've already got all of them removed. I put this one back in place just to show you, but this is also a 10 millimeter bolt right here. We loosen this up all the way and remove that bolt. Now here's where you get to the point where you can start breaking things. So let's be careful with this. You can push back on this little tab right here, and it will release it off of the tab that you can see in here. However, these things are brittle after time, so you can snap them. This one's actually loose now, so it's probably a little bit broken. So what I recommend is taking a very tiny flat blade screwdriver or a pick and just slightly lifting it up while you use your other hand to push this plug back. Okay. Now if you do break the tab off, which I've got one that's broken off, there's a gasket in there that holds this thing in pretty tight, so don't panic. It'll still stay snug enough to where it's not going to go anywhere. Oops. So these things just sit right on top of the spark plug. It's got a rubber boot that holds it snug as well. It kind of pops right on. So just grab the whole thing and kind of move it around a little bit, and then it pops right off the top of the spark plug. And you can see the boot there that snugs right down on top of the plug. Okay, so now we're ready to remove the spark plug. It's way down in there. This is where it's helpful to have a particular spark plug socket. And these have a rubber piece in there that grips the top of the spark plug. You don't have to do this. I'll show you the way that you get it out of there if you don't have one, but it is a deep socket. This one's a 5/8, and that's pretty standard for most of the spark plugs on these smaller cars. But just want to use your extension and get it down in there, and then, you know, break it loose with the wrench. Once you've got it loose, you just unscrew it all the way. And if you've got a newer deep socket with the rubber thing in it, it'll latch onto that spark plug and pull it out for you. But mine's worn out, so it doesn't do that. And that's where this handy thing comes in. If you're going to be doing a lot of work on cars, you need the magnet, the telescoping magnet. And this is why. You can get lost parts, you can pull spark plugs out, and it's a brilliant tool. Okay, so the reason I started this project was because we had an error code of P2423, which has to do with the emissions, and part of that could be due to a misfire. So I checked the plugs and See if we can get a focus on it. This one is kind of corroded. I wouldn't necessarily call it burnt, but it's definitely worn out. You can see the electrodes all wonky there. These are platinum or iridiums, I'm not sure, but definitely time to replace them. So that's why we're here today. Here's a note on spark plugs. The original spark plug that came out of this was an NGK iridium FR5EI, and it's gapped to about 0.04 or 0.044. These are a little bit wider because they're worn out. These Bosch that I got are not specifically gapped for this car. They're 0.032 or a 0.8 millimeter, and that's too small of a gap. So we're going to open up the gap a little bit, and I've got a feeler gauge here. If you just go to the auto parts store and tell them exactly what car you have, they're going to give you some that are pre-gapped the proper way, and that's probably easier for you. But I wanted these because there's a rebate and they're a good plug. So I'm just going to open up the gap a little bit. It takes a little bit of time. So here's something interesting. This spark plug doesn't have much magnetic stuff on the top, I guess. So I had to get a bigger magnet, or you can use a grabber tool as well, and just lower it right down in there. Give it a little shake and drop it in. So this is going to be one of the most critical parts, is tightening down the spark plug. Want to get your spark plug wrench or socket in there, and then it's not super easy, but once you feel it starting to thread, make sure you don't cross thread it. If it gets tight right away, you're cross threading. So once it feels like it's going in there nicely, which this one is, and it's slowly tightening up, you get it to about finger tight. And then, now these have the washer, the crush washer on them. You can see here, sorry for my disaster of a messy garage, but this is the way we have it after 18 years. Get your socket on there, your ratchet, and then, so you're at finger tight now, and most manufacturers recommend 1/2 to 5/8 of a turn. You got to be careful with aluminum heads though. 10 to 20 pounds of torque is all they can handle, so you don't want to strip them. They don't want to be loose, but you don't want to strip them because then you're screwed. Now this one only tightened to about 1/4 of a turn before it started getting tight, so I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to strip it. So I'm going to hand tighten all of these before I get the wrench in there. This one's going pretty well. The socket fits the diameter of the hole pretty good, so these spark plugs are threading right in really nice. Just hand tight. Go to the next one. Sorry for the bouncy video. I've got this mount around my neck and it moves a lot. So since that first plug tightened up so quickly with only 1/4 turn, I'm going to go ahead and use the torque wrench on this one just to be safe. And I've got it set to about 15 pounds. Okay, there's snug. All right, so the process is reversed. You just put the coil packs, that's what I call them. I don't know if that's the exact Mitsubishi term for it, but put those back on, pop in the, oh, there goes another cap, or clip. You see these things break off super easy. Just don't drop it in the hole. Put your 10mm bolt back in, and then we'll do the rest. Once you've hand threaded these in, just tighten them up a little bit. These aren't critical to be super tight, so just hand tight. Put the ratchet. Another thing you want to do before you put everything all back together is start the car. Make sure it runs properly, that it runs smooth, because if you didn't gap the spark plugs or you got the wrong ones, you'll know right away whether you gapped them wrong or got the wrong ones. Or if you got the really wrong ones, you're going to hear a lot of banging when you start it. And I mean, if somebody gave you totally too long of a thread spark plug, which I've never seen happen, but you never know. So be careful who looks up the spark plugs for this for you. Make sure you got the right ones before you put them in, and do not over torque them. These crush washers, they go a little ways and then they stop, and you don't want to go past that. It's better to have them, I mean, they got to be sealed, but you don't want to strip the aluminum head threads. Engine cover goes back on, 2 bolts. All right, so now just do your mental checklist. Remember, if you have tightened all the plugs, you put the caps back on, the coil plugs, you put all 4 bolts back in, tighten those down, not too tight, it's plastic. You tighten down these, and you tighten down the 2 engine cover bolts. One thing I want to talk about is that engine code that we had earlier. It was a 2423, I believe, a P2423. It had to do with emissions. So last night I went ahead and pulled out the mass airflow sensor and sprayed some electronics cleaner on it in case that was the issue. Usually that's a pretty common problem with some cars. The other thing was, I thought, okay, spark plugs misfire, that'll cause it. I did crawl into the car and checked the exhaust for leaks, the intake for leaks. I didn't see anything, and this car is in pretty good shape. It's got 170,000 on it, but I kind of doubt that it's the catalytic converter. It could be an O2 sensor, but I'm going to clear the code and see if it comes back after doing the spark plug change. Thanks for watching. Glad to have you back. We're going to do a tight rod video and also a rear brake pad video probably next. Please subscribe if you want to see them.